Happy NFL Kickoff Day. Hey Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl. Tonight is the kickoff for the NFL regular season, so we get to actually see some real football tonight. And as we come into the season, usually as Eagles fans, our rooting interests are pretty clear. For me, obviously the Eagles are my favorite team, and I love to root for whoever's playing Dallas and the Giants, the Redskins maybe to a lesser degree. So that's usually pretty clear as to who my rooting interests are. But this year, there's an extra wrinkle in all of this. And that is, what should we do about the Vikings? Should we actually have a rooting interest against them? Well, when I did my video last weekend talking about the Sam Bradford deal, I had actually gone into some length when I was recording that video about what I thought we should be thinking about in terms of rooting or not rooting for or against the Vikings. I ended up cutting that portion of the video out because I thought it was getting a little bit too long of a video, but I thought I'd share that portion with you now as to what my thoughts are as to whether or not we should be rooting for Sam Bradford to have some success in Minnesota. So in talking about Bradford and the Vikings, really the question now becomes, do we root for them or don't we root for them? Well, it could go one of two ways. Obviously, we want them to lose because then that first-round draft pick ends up all that much higher. But the other end of it is the fourth-round draft pick is conditional based on how the Vikings end up this season. So here's the way I look at it. I'm going to be rooting against the Vikings at least early in the season and hoping that maybe they are not going to be as successful as they hope to be with Sam Bradford at quarterback. If that's the case, if they are struggling early in the season, then I'm going to keep rooting against them and hope that they finish as low as possible to get us the highest draft pick as possible. But if they end up actually are in playoff contention and they make the playoffs, then at that point it's going to be the first round draft pick is going to be in the 20s anyway. So at that point you're better off actually rooting for them, because the conditional fourth round pick for next year or the following year, really 2018 we're talking, the fourth round draft pick that's conditional, that's the lowest it can be. It can be a fourth round draft pick. But if the Vikings get to the NFC Championship game this year, it gets bumped up to a third round draft pick, and if the Vikings win the Super Bowl, it's actually a second round draft pick next year. So we're sort of in a weird scenario where we want the Vikings to lose, but we also want them to win. Let's see how it goes early in the season. Right now I'm going to be rooting against the Vikings, but if the Vikings start doing well, we should probably get on the bandwagon and then hope for a higher draft pick the following year, when that conditional pick could potentially move up to a third or second round pick. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts as to whether or not we should be rooting for or against Sam. Starting of the season, we're going to be rooting against him and hope he fails. But in the off chance that they do have some success and get into the playoffs, let's root for them to go as far as possible, because it'll help that other draft pick in the 2018 draft year. Of course, the other wrinkle in this, that if you really think about it, I know there is very little chance of this actually happening, but there is the possibility, if the Eagles catch lightning in a bottle with Carson Wentz and he ends up being a lot better than we think in terms of as a rookie quarterback. I think he's got a lot of potential for the long term, but as a rookie quarterback, if he has a lot of success, if we end up finishing above the Vikings, that means that, in essence, what we ended up doing in trading our draft pick for next year to get Carson Wentz is we ended up actually moving up in the draft because the deal for Bradford gets us the Minnesota first-round pick. Like I said, very small likelihood of that happening based on where I think the Eagles will finish and where I think the Vikings will finish. But there is that possibility that if we end up finishing ahead of the Vikings, that we've actually ended up in this whole mess, moving up in the draft next year. So that's something to be keeping a look at as we go through the season, and obviously makes that game in October that much more interesting when Sam Bradford returns to the link. So I'll be checking in over the weekend with my prediction and preview of the Browns game, but until then, fly Eagles fly.